Hey footy fans, time for a bit more footy fun with FootyFin. And look, I know that opening track was by Plastic Bertrand, who's actually Belgian, not French, but the lyrics are French, okay? And so, yes, Rugby World Cup. One more reflection on one of the quarterfinals before we move on to the thrilling semi-finals that are just around the corner now. And look, I want to reflect on France, the host nation in this particular Rugby World Cup, and they will be hurting right now, no doubt. There was a lot of pressure on them. They've been one of the best nations in the world. They've been at number 1 and 2 in the world rankings over the past few years, and of course that coupled with being the home nation brought a hell of a lot of pressure on them, possibly too much pressure and expectation in the end. But look, I'm going to try to keep this diplomatic and compassionate, but I, for one, am not surprised that France are not going to find themselves in the final of the Rugby World Cup. I wouldn't have been surprised to see them in the semi-final, depending on who they were to face in the quarterfinal, but I wasn't surprised to see them ousted by the Box. Anyway, the reason I say all this is that over the years, and going back over 10 Rugby World Cups now, and as many seasons, going back to the late 80s at least, the one issue, the one challenge for the French national rugby team has been consistency, to find consistency. Sadly, they've been very erratic, and they've been on roller coasters, highs and lows from one weekend to the next often. And I'm going to give a couple of examples here. So that for me, I've been saying this for probably at least 20 years to anyone who would listen, but the biggest challenge for France in a tournament such as this is to not only get through the pool stages, but to then win knockout rugby stages, particularly over 3 weekends, quarters, semi-final, final, if they were ever to win the Rugby World Cup. Okay, so let me just give you a few examples. So I'm going to quickly run over their record, but basically in 87, they made it through to the final and they lost to New Zealand in Auckland. In 91, they lost a quarter-final to England. In 95, they lost a semi-final to the host South Africa. 99, they made it to the final and they lost to Australia. 2003, they made it to the semi and they lost to England. Then they lost the 3v4 playoff to New Zealand. In 07, they made it to the semi, and this was at home and in France, and they lost to England, and then they lost the 3v4 playoff against Argentina. In 11, they made it to the final, again against New Zealand and Auckland. They lost that. In 2015, they lost the quarterfinal to New Zealand. In 2019, they lost the quarterfinal to Wales. And of course, just last weekend, they lost the quarterfinal to South Africa. But drilling even deeper here, okay, I'm going to go back to that illustration of highs versus lows. So back to the very first ever Rugby World Cup in 1987, hosted jointly between Australia and New Zealand. So in the semi-final, they put in a stunning performance, one of the best team tries you'll ever see near the final siren to beat the much favoured Wallabies in Sydney and beat them 30-24. Turn around a week later and they get whipped in the final by New Zealand, 29 points to 9. So they lose the final by 20 points. In 1999, they cause a massive upset in the semi-final against tournament favourites New Zealand. They come from behind late in the game and score, I think, 3 tries to win 43-31. They beat the favoured All Blacks by 12 points. Turn around a week later, they lose the final to Australia 35-12, a 23-point margin. Just similar to 87. Then in 2011, okay, they're in the pool, same pool as the host nation, the All Blacks. They lose that game, But it gets even worse for France. They lose a pool match to Tonga. Probably their only ever loss to Tonga, I would imagine. They lost that 14-19. And yet they somehow recover from that, make their way to the final of the damn thing, and lose to New Zealand by one single point at Eden Park, their fortress. 7-8, they lost that one. So that's 3 examples across 3 different World Cups across, 24 years, where they've gone from a stunning semi-final result. No, 2 cases where they went from a stunning semi-final win against the odds to get whipped by 20 points or more the following weekend in the final. And then in 2011, they lose pool matches to New Zealand, but furthermore to Tonga. And then they turn around and they're only beaten by 1 point at Eden Park, where the All Blacks have not lost since 1994, which was incidentally to France. So there you have it. Look, and I would just say this, there was a lot of pressure on the French team. They did have a couple of key injuries before the tournament to Ntamack and others, but there was a hell of a lot of pressure on their captain and scrum half, Antoine Dupont, who was widely touted as the best player in the world. And so there was a massive weight on that man's shoulders. And then in a crazy, inconceivable situation, the French coach, in a game against Namibia that they end up winning 96-0, still has Dupont on the field in the second half, and he suffers a fracture to his eye socket. Oh la la! What the fuck was the coach thinking? Seriously. So anyway, the poor fella's not only having to deal with the pressure of being the captain of the host nation, much fancied, touted as the best player in the world, and now he's dealing with a fractured eye socket that's been operated on and had a screw and plate inserted in it, just because the coach left him on in the second half in a 96-0 win against Namibia. Crazy. Anyway, commiserations to France and its fans. They are flying the flag. They are keeping rugby strong, I would say. What is it? They have 3 or 4 professional leagues in France. We're seeing players come from all over the world, including the South Pacific, South America, etc., to play in France. Apparently, as opposed to nations like Australia and probably England, where it's a bit more of a private school game, it's evidently more of a working class game in France. And look, many would say they deserve better. Sadly, they didn't get it. I would have been happy to see them win, because I want a team that's never won it to win the damn thing. And the only chance of that now is Los Pumas, Argentina, by the way, but more on that later. Anyway, commiserations, France, but diplomatically and compassionately, I say, I for one am not that surprised, given their record over the past 30 odd years, including in Rugby World Cups. All right, that's it from me. Until my predictions for the semi-finals, I'll catch you out by the corner post. See ya.